"Don't touch him, Lena. He's not your problem," Marcus snapped, his voice echoing under the dim streetlight that flickered beside the cemetery gate, but Lena didn't move. Her eyes, gray like winter ash, remained fixed on the small, trembling figure sprawled before the statue of the angel. It wasn't a person. It was a dog. Mangy, ribs showing, fur caked with mud, his body curved at the foot of the stone angel as though it was the only thing keeping him alive. The statue itself was weathered, its marble wings chipped, moss tracing the folds of its gown. Locals said the angel belonged to no grave. It was older than the stones around it, older than the cemetery, older even than the stories whispered in late-night taverns about souls who found peace only beneath its wings. But tonight, it wasn't myth that stopped Lena in her tracks. It was the dog. He wasn't just resting there, he was guarding it, as if the angel were his master, his home, his reason. His eyes were glazed, yet they burned with a strange defiance, refusing to move even when Marcus kicked gravel near his paws. "See? He's half dead," Marcus muttered. "Dogs like that don't last the night. Let the groundskeeper deal with it." Lena knelt, ignoring Marcus, her knees pressing into the damp soil. She whispered, "Why here? Why you?" as though the dog could answer. The creature lifted his head. His ears twitched, one torn from an old fight, the other drooping with exhaustion. For a moment, Lena swore he recognized her, not her face, but something deeper. He shifted slightly, pressing his muzzle against the base of the angel, then looked back at her as though to say, "This is not my ending. Watch me." It wasn't the first strange thing she'd seen here. Lena had worked nights at the hospice across the street for 5 years, and sometimes she came to the cemetery to breathe, to shed the weight of dying voices that still clung to her skin. The angel statue had always pulled at her, though she never understood why. But now, with this dog curled beneath it, the pull became unbearable, like a hand gripping her chest from inside. Marcus cursed under his breath. "We're wasting time. Either drag the mutt out or leave him to rot." But Lena stood, her eyes never leaving the statue. "If he's dying, he's chosen where to die. And I want to know why." The words startled even her. They didn't feel like her own. A wind stirred then, cold and sharp. The leaves rattled against the iron fence, and the streetlight hissed out, drowning them in darkness. For a split second, Lena thought she saw movement behind the angel. A flicker, a shadow, something standing tall where nothing should be. When she blinked, it was gone. Only the dog remained, chest rising shallow, eyes locked on the angel's face. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Enough, we're leaving." But Lena shook him off, harder than she intended. "You don't see it, do you? He's not just lying there. He's waiting. Waiting for what?" Marcus snapped. Her answer came in a whisper, raw and trembling. "For someone to witness." The dog shifted again, struggling to his feet. His legs buckled, but he didn't collapse. Instead, he turned toward the gates, eyes darting between Lena and the angel, as if urging her to follow. A guttural whine escaped his throat, a sound that clawed straight into her chest. Something inside Lena cracked open, a place she hadn't touched since her brother's death 3 winters ago. The same cemetery, the same angel. She remembered kneeling there, asking for a sign, any sign, that he was at peace. None had come. Not until now. The dog limped forward, his gaze steady, his path deliberate. Not random, not aimless. Every step seemed to mark something, to point toward something unseen. Marcus spat on the ground. "This is madness. You want to follow a half-dead stray into the dark? Go ahead, but don't drag me into it." For once, Lena didn't care about his cynicism. She followed. The dog led her deeper into the cemetery, past crooked gravestones and hollow oaks that creaked like old bones. His paws left faint prints in the damp earth, and Lena felt compelled to match them, step by step. Each time she faltered, he paused, looking back, his eyes glimmering faintly, reflecting the silver of the moon. By the time they reached the far end, Marcus was a distant voice behind them, muttering curses into the night. The dog stopped at a small, unmarked patch of ground. Bare earth, no stone, no name. He lay down there, curling into the soil, pressing his head as though it belonged to him, as though he had carried it in his soul his entire life. Lena's breath hitched, because she knew this spot. It was where they had buried her brother. Unmarked because they had no money for a stone, no words to immortalize his name. Only she had known the exact place, and she hadn't told anyone, not Marcus, not her parents, not even the priest, but this dog, this broken, dying dog, had found it. Her knees buckled and she collapsed beside him, hands shaking. The angel's silhouette towered behind them, its stone face unreadable, and for the first time in 3 years, Lena didn't feel alone. The letters trembled in Lena's grip as if they carried not only words but the pulse of her brother's ghost. Her chest rose and fell in uneven gasps, each breath fighting against the tightness closing around her ribs. She wanted to tear them open, devour the truth sealed in faded ink, but Marcus's presence pressed down on her like a storm cloud. He stood too close, eyes fixed not on her grief but on the box itself, as though it threatened to unravel something he had kept buried for years. "I don't understand how this got here," Lena whispered, though part of her already did. The dog had led her to this place for a reason. The earth had given up its secret willingly, and Marcus's rigid stance told her he knew exactly why. "You shouldn't touch them," Marcus said sharply, his voice carrying more urgency than concern. "Old papers, mold, rot, it could all be worthless. You're letting your head spin wild because of a stray dog and an old statue." Lena met his gaze, and for the first time since she had known him, his words didn't mask reassurance. They masked fear. The realization struck her with brutal clarity. He wasn't afraid of mold or worthless scraps of paper. He was afraid of what the letters contained. Her hands trembled harder as she pulled the string free and unfolded the first sheet. The paper crackled under her touch, fragile but still strong enough to carry her brother's handwriting. Her eyes blurred with tears before she could even read the first line. She steadied herself, the world narrowing to ink and memory. "Lena, if you have found this, then my silence has ended. I couldn't say these things aloud, but I had to leave them somewhere safe. The night by the river wasn't an accident. Someone wanted it that way." Her breath caught, the air slicing her lungs. She blinked rapidly, the words burning into her mind. She read on. "I thought I could trust Marcus. He said he would help me, but he wasn't there to pull me out. He was there to push me under. He said you deserved a life without my shadow, that I was nothing but weight holding you back. I believed him in those final moments, but now I wish I had fought harder. If you're reading this, don't let him bury the truth with me." The letter slipped from her hand into the dirt. The sound it made was barely audible, but in the silence of the cemetery, it was deafening. She stared at Marcus, the edges of her vision swimming. "Lena," he began, his tone low, almost pleading, but she could hear the steel underneath. "You can't believe that." He was drowning. He wasn't thinking straight. "Do you really think I—" "Stop," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady enough to cut through him. "Don't you dare say his words were a mistake. He wrote them knowing I might never see them. He wrote them because he knew you'd lie." Marcus's mouth opened, but the protest withered on his tongue. His eyes flicked from the letter in the mud to the bundle still in her lap, as if every page was a knife waiting to pierce him. His silence was louder than any confession. The dog, frail and shaking, let out a sudden growl, its thin body pushing against the soil as though gathering strength it didn't have. His eyes fixed on Marcus, not with fear but with a strange, almost human defiance. For a moment, Lena thought the dog saw him the way her brother had seen him, without the masks, without the charm, only the shadow of what he truly was. "You knew," Lena whispered, clutching the rest of the letters to her chest. "All this time I hated myself for not being there, and you let me carry that guilt like it belonged to me. But it wasn't mine, Marcus. It was yours." The accusation cracked something open. His calm veneers slipped, and anger surged through his features. "Do you have any idea what you're saying?" he snapped. "You're talking about murder, about me. Do you want to destroy everything we've built just because of a dying boy's ramblings?" Her tears fell freely now, each one stinging like acid. "He wasn't rambling. He was my brother. He trusted me to find this. And I did." Marcus stepped closer, his shadow swallowing hers, his voice low and venomous. "If you tell anyone what's written in those letters, no one will believe you. They'll think you're broken, clinging to ghosts and stray animals for answers. You'll lose everything, Lena. Everything." She pressed the letters tighter against her heart, feeling the weight of her brother's truth, the dog's shallow breaths at her side, and the angel's towering silence above them. The night seemed to hold its breath with her, and then, as if to break the moment, a sound drifted through the cemetery. Not the laugh she had heard before, but a voice, soft and unmistakable, carried on the wind. Her brother's voice. "Don't let him take you too." Lena froze, her skin prickling. Marcus's face went pale, his eyes darting wildly as though he too had heard it. For the first time, fear, not anger, consumed him. The dog collapsed fully, his body curling at the roots as if he had given all the strength he had left. His eyes closed, but there was peace in the way he stilled, as though his mission was complete. Lena's sobs broke free, raw and unstoppable. The letters burned in her hands. The angel's stone wings loomed above, casting a shadow that felt less like cold marble and more like shelter, and Marcus, standing in that shadow, suddenly looked small, fragile, and cornered. The truth had begun to surface, and Lena knew she would not let it be buried again. The cemetery had fallen into a silence so thick that Lena could hear the frantic rhythm of her own heart pounding in her ears. Her fingers tightened around the bundle of letters, knuckles pale in the moonlight, as though releasing them would mean releasing her brother all over again. Marcus stood opposite her, his face carved into stone. But beneath the hardness was something he could not hide. Fear. Not fear of the night, not fear of the dog or the angel behind them, but fear of the words her brother had left for her, the words he had buried in the earth, hoping she would someday unearth them. Lena's breath trembled as she crouched back beside the dog, her other hand resting gently on his fragile body. His fur was rough, tangled with mud and scars, yet his presence was grounding, as though he had carried her across a chasm she hadn't realized she was still standing at the edge of. She whispered to him without thinking, "You found it for me. You knew I needed this." Marcus took a step forward and his voice dropped to a hiss. "You don't understand what you're holding, Lena. Those letters don't tell the truth. They tell his truth, twisted by his bitterness. He wanted to drag me down with him because he couldn't stand being weak." His words scraped like metal, but Lena's focus didn't break. She opened the second letter, her hands trembling so violently that the paper shook, and yet she read, because she had no choice but to read. "Lena, I need you to understand why. Marcus told me I was in the way, that your future depended on him, not me. He said you would never escape the burden of my failures. He told me you would never be free while I lived. I believed him, and that was my sin. I believed his lies more than I believed your love, and I carried those lies into the river, where I let the current claim me. But I left behind this truth, so one day you could forgive yourself. You didn't fail me, Lena. I failed you by letting him convince me I was unworthy." Her chest heaved as the tears came, spilling down her face unchecked. The dog shifted, pressing his head weakly against her lap as though sensing the storm inside her. Marcus moved closer, his boots crunching on the wet earth, and though she wanted to back away, something inside her snapped. She rose to her feet, clutching the letter in one hand and the locket in the other, her voice raw with rage and anguish. "You stood beside me at his funeral," she cried, her voice breaking. "You held me when I blamed myself. You let me drown in guilt for years while you walked free. And now I know. You wanted me to carry that weight so I would never look at you differently. How could you, Marcus? He trusted you. I trusted you." Marcus's mask cracked just for a moment, and she saw the truth in his silence. He did not deny it. He did not reach for her in comfort. Instead, his eyes flicked to the remaining letters, hunger and desperation flickering there. He wanted them gone, destroyed before the night was over. Before Lena could react, Marcus lunged forward. She stumbled back, clutching the letters against her chest, but he was faster. His hand gripped her wrist hard enough to make her cry out. The dog growled again, dragging himself up with a strength that should not have been possible, his teeth bared. He lunged, snapping at Marcus's leg. Marcus kicked him away brutally, the sound of the dog's body hitting the earth breaking Lena's heart more than her brother's letters ever could. "No," she screamed, falling to her knees beside the dog whose body twitched but whose spirit still burned in his eyes. She pressed her forehead against his, whispering, "Hold on, please. You've brought me this far. Don't leave me yet." The angel's shadow loomed above them, the marble face watching silently as if bearing witness to the battle between truth and deceit unfolding at its feet. Marcus, panting, stood over her, his expression twisted. "You don't understand," he spat. "I did what I had to. He was weak, Lena. He was drowning long before the river took him. He was dragging you down with him, and I couldn't let that happen. I wanted a future with you, without him tying you to his failures. The confession struck her harder than a blow. Her knees weakened, but rage steadied her. You wanted a future built on his death? She whispered. You call that love? That's poison, Marcus. And you fed it to me every day while I thought you were the one keeping me alive. For the first time, Marcus faltered. His eyes darted between her and the angel, the moonlight cutting harsh lines across his face. He looked smaller than she had ever seen him, his certainty cracking, but desperation soon overtook him again. He reached for her, his voice suddenly soft, pleading. Lena, listen to me. We can bury these letters again. No one has to know. It doesn't change how I feel about you. I did this for us. She recoiled as though his touch burned. There is no us, she said, her voice shaking but firm. Not anymore. Not after this. Marcus's face hardened, his last mask shattering. He lunged again, but before he could reach her, the dog forced himself between them, his body trembling with exhaustion but his spirit unbroken. He snarled, a sound so fierce it seemed to echo from the stone angel itself. Marcus stumbled back, startled by the ferocity of a creature that should have been dead hours ago. And then, something Lena could never explain happened. The wind surged through the cemetery, rattling the trees, lifting the fallen leaves into a swirl around the angel's base. The dog, barely standing, lifted his head and howled, the sound piercing and mournful yet filled with defiance. The angel's shadow stretched longer, and for a breathless moment, Lena thought she saw its stone wings shift, just slightly, as though bending over her and the dog in protection. Marcus cursed under his breath, stumbling backward. His bravado broke, replaced by something closer to terror. This is madness, he muttered. You're letting ghosts and a dying mutt fill your head. None of this means anything, but Lena knew it did. Every second, every sign, every breath of the dog at her side meant more than Marcus's hollow words ever had. She held the letters tight, the locket pressed to her chest, and rose to her feet. You killed my brother, Marcus, she said, her voice trembling but steadying with each word. You killed him, and you buried the truth. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. It finds its way out, even if it takes the breath of a dying dog to show the path. Marcus's face twisted, and for the first time, he looked powerless. He turned and stumbled toward the gate, muttering curses, his shadow shrinking into the darkness until he vanished completely. The cemetery fell silent again. The wind eased, the leaves settled, and only the faint wheeze of the dog's breath filled the night. Lena collapsed beside him, tears streaming down her face as she stroked his fur. You saved me, she whispered, her voice breaking. You saved me from him, from myself, from all the lies I carried. Please don't leave me now. The dog's eyes, dim but unwavering, locked on hers one last time. His body shuddered, his breathing slowed, and then, with a sigh that felt like the closing of a chapter, he lay still. Lena clung to him, sobbing into his fur, her grief raw yet strangely cleansing. For the first time since her brother's death, she felt the crushing guilt begin to lift. She looked up at the angel, whose marble face remained unchanged, but whose presence felt alive, eternal. She whispered to the night, to her brother, to the dog, I will carry your truth. I promise. As dawn began to touch the horizon with the faintest streaks of light, Lena sat in the soil, the box of letters by her side, the dog's body cradled in her arms. She knew her life would never be the same. The letters still had more to tell, and she would read them all. Marcus might try to bury the truth again, but now she had something stronger than fear. She had her brother's words, the angel's silent witness, and the loyalty of a dog who had carried her to the truth with his last breath. The night had taken much from her, but it had also given her something priceless. And as the cemetery stirred with the first cries of mourning birds, Lena knew the story wasn't over. It had only just begun. The first rays of dawn cut through the fog, washing the cemetery in muted gold. Lena sat at the base of the angel statue, her arms still wrapped around the dog's body. He was heavy in her embrace, not from weight but from meaning, from all that he had carried to her before his last breath. His fur smelled of earth and rain, and though he was gone, there was a strange peace in his stillness, as if he had fulfilled his final duty. She laid him gently on the soil, smoothing the fur on his head. The letters remained in her lap, the locket warm against her skin. For a long time she couldn't move. The silence pressed in, not cruelly this time, but with a quiet reverence. She thought of her brother, his laughter, his weary eyes, the loneliness he had carried, and finally she let herself cry for him in a way she hadn't before. Not with guilt, not with self-blame, but with love. When her tears slowed, she reached for the remaining letters. Her hands shook as she unfolded one after another, reading in the pale light. Each page was a thread her brother had left behind, weaving together a truth she hadn't been ready to face. He spoke of his doubts, his shame, his fear of burdening her, but also of his love for her, fierce and unshaken. The final letter was different. It wasn't confessional. It was a plea. Lena, if you have come this far, then you have carried my pain and uncovered my truth. But I beg you, don't let it end here. Don't let Marcus or anyone else chain you to the shadows of what happened. Live. Carry me not as guilt, but as love. And if you ever doubt yourself, look for the angel. It will remind you that you were never alone. Her hand pressed against her mouth as the words sank in, her shoulders trembling. She thought of the dog who had chosen the angel's feet as his resting place, of how he had guided her without hesitation. Perhaps he had not been astray at all. Perhaps he had been sent, one last guardian for a sister still drowning in grief. The crunch of footsteps on gravel broke her reverie. She stiffened, turning toward the cemetery gates. For a moment, her heart seized with fear, expecting Marcus's shadow to return, but it wasn't him. It was the groundskeeper, an older man with a lantern swinging at his side. His brow furrowed when he saw her, the open box and the dog at her feet. "What are you doing here at this hour?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. Lena wiped her face with her sleeve. "Finding what I should have found years ago." The man's gaze fell to the letters, then to the angel. He sighed, his shoulders sagging as though he carried secrets of his own. "People say that statue was carved for no one, but I've tended this ground long enough to know better. Folks come here broken, and somehow it gives them what they need. I've seen drunks sober up, widows find peace, and lost children find their way home. Maybe you were meant to come here tonight." Lena swallowed hard, unable to answer. She looked back at the angel, at the wings etched with cracks, and for the first time she understood. The statue wasn't about perfection. It was about endurance, about carrying what was broken and still standing tall. The groundskeeper tipped his hat and walked on, leaving her alone again. She looked down at the dog one last time, stroking his fur. "You weren't a stray," she whispered. "You were a messenger, and I won't forget you." As the sun climbed higher, Lena rose, gathering the letters and the locket. She pressed them to her chest, casting one last look at the angel and the patch of earth where her brother lay. The guilt that had suffocated her for years had loosened, replaced by a new vow. She would not bury his truth again. She would carry it, not as a chain, but as a light. She walked toward the gates, her steps slow but steady, the weight of the night behind her. The world beyond the cemetery waited, and for the first time in years, she didn't dread facing it. She felt her brother's presence not in sorrow, but in strength. And though the dog's body lay still at the angel's feet, she knew his spirit had not left. It had simply gone where it belonged, back into the silence that had guided her here, back into the light that would carry her forward. As she stepped into the waking streets, Lena whispered into the dawn, "I am not alone any more." And the morning air carried the words as though the angel itself had heard.